Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of That Sounds Fun. I'm your host, Annie F. Downs. I'm so happy to be here with you today on a Tuesday and on Halloween. Today on the show, I get to talk with my friends Nate Henry and Luke Rodgers, who are the podcast hosts of Blurry Creatures. Okay, I got to tell y'all, this is truly one of my favorite podcasts. I think it is so fascinating. Nate and Luke launched it in 2020. It's a top 10 science podcast, and it is so good, y'all. It is so good. Now, listen, they do episodes about a lot of different blurry creatures and unknown things, and some of them are wildly interesting. Some of them are a little scary. And so picking and choosing as you listen through their feed is a great way to get to know the Blurry Creatures guys and their show. Now, listen, I know this may not be your thing historically, but it is 100% what sounds fun to me today. And I think you're going to find this episode and these guys so interesting. And my hope is that your curiosity about things like Bigfoot is going to go up a little bit on this Halloween. It's very, very fun. So here's my conversation with Nate Henry and Luke Rodgers from Blurry Creatures. Nate and Luke, welcome to That Sounds Fun.
It's great to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
Big fan, Annie.
Oh,
Big fan.
thanks.
Yeah.
Y'all are from Blurry Creatures, which, Nate, I've gotten to express to Luke an uncomfortable amount of times because he's a real life friend. What a fan I am.
Really?
But let me say to you, dude, this is so dumb, and I may cry telling you. I don't think I've said this to you. Last summer, when my sister had a baby that had a genetic disorder, and he only lived 2 months.
I know the story.
Yes, they live in Atlanta. I was driving back and forth to Atlanta constantly. The only escape I had was Blurry Creatures. I listened up and down the highway for weeks.
Wow.
And it just gave me like God. In a very bizarre way, it gave me God. And y'all talk about the weirdest stuff. And it's also hilarious. And there's a ton of episodes, so you don't run out. And it is just, I remember we got to go to a family wedding in the middle of it. And it was another long drive. And the whole time I just went like, what would I do if I didn't have this? So
I don't know that story.
thank y'all.
That's
I know,
cool.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised.
I mean, listen, you let me drive your rental car. You hang out with my
That's
wife.
right,
I mean,
that's right.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
That's
Thank
flattering.
you.
It means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So what y'all have done is more than just it's become a lot more for y'all too, right?
Yeah, we had no idea. I mean, and we get emails like that here and there and messages from people that, been in church their whole life and just kind of thanking us. And we didn't, I think, over time, we just kind of followed the data where it was going. And we didn't really try to shape the show in one way or another. We had no idea that some of the conversations we'd be having would be so intense and gets wrapped up in these theological threads that a lot of people don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And Luke and I are just like, whatever, let's just talk about it. We don't,
Yeah.
Dude,
we don't
let's
really
add
have an
some-
agenda.
Yeah, let's add some 80s flair to it. And,
Yeah.
and let's have fun talking about the weird stuff.
Are you ever afraid?
What do you mean by that?
Like when you're recording, do you ever feel afraid of what you're talking about or afraid of what people respond? Or do you ever feel like this is scary for me? Because sometimes your episodes are scary for me.
I mean, it's funny. Sometimes I'll be editing and I'll hear something in the house and I'm like, my kids are gone half the week. So
Yeah.
I'm like, what was that?
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think Luke and I have been in different spheres before this where you kind of you get used to people having their opinions and you stop caring. I think sometimes we do care. We try not to just like be sensationalize the material. We try to be real people, but I think that if this was our first endeavor, we probably would care a lot more than we do now. Now it's just like, being 40 is great.
Yeah.
You just don't care anymore.
Full stop. Being 40 is great.
is,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
so much easier.
We do have a lot of heavy stuff. I mean, there's times
Yeah.
where we're holding back tears. I mean, there are episodes, especially, I'm a pretty new dad. Like my son's 15 months old and Nate has 2 kids. But if you get into our catalog, some of the things that come up, because it's a reality in our world, and there's a lot of folks out there really banging this drum. I think Jim Caviezel's one of the ones that's doing it very loudly. It's just things happen to kids.
Yeah.
We touch on a lot of things, right? Bigfoot, all of the weird stuff in the Bible, what the world calls paranormal, and within that you get some crazy dark stuff. So being afraid, not so much, but I think sometimes you sit and you listen to these people's, and it's so dark and it's there's so much depravity that it's a hard place to like sit. You want to sit with these people, but it is heartbreaking, one. And two, it is a reminder, at least for me, Nate, and I know that you're the same way. It's a reminder that we are in a world at war, and we are in the midst of this cosmic war between the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of God, and that the darkness and people in general are capable of very dark things. And we don't want to hide from that, though. I think it's very easy to stick your head in the sand and say, I'm just not going to think about that. But I do think that Nate and I we're Christians, right? So we come from all of this from a biblical lens and from a standpoint of our faith. And it disservices no one for us to pretend like maybe these things don't happen or pretend that people don't have these experiences.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is for whatever reason, we found this space where exposing the darkness in the same way that it talks about in Ephesians is not to participate in the things of darkness, but rather to expose them.
Yes.
And I feel like sometimes that's our charge. And you know what that does? It puts a target on your back.
Right.
It absolutely does. And so, but I feel like that's almost a badge of honor. Like if you're not getting attention or pushback, I know one of the things you want to talk about, and I'm probably skipping ahead,
No, you're fine.
is spiritual warfare. Is that it's rough, I think, sometimes to sit in these chairs, Nate and I sit in, but in that sense, but also like, man, it's confirmation. If you're not making a difference for the kingdom of God, then there's no reason for the kingdom of darkness to mess with you, push back on you, right? And so I think our goal is to have hard conversations, have weird conversations, have fun conversations, but have them all centered around, around the scriptures, around the Bible, around the biblical lens, and ultimately around Christ. But that will elicit, resistance.
Yeah.
And we've had some, I think, over the years, weird things happen. In general.
I know. Yeah, I kind of had my marriage fall apart right in the middle of it. And that was really hard. And I think we missed only one episode. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Just got to keep going. Just kind of push back the tears and push through that. And, Luke was trying to have a family and there was just a bunch of like pressure. And then
we lost a baby.
A lot of friends just kind of write you off as crazy. And then obviously during the whole lockdowns, there was a lot of opinions on both sides of what. But I think in some ways, there were certain people that set out to like, Frodo and Sam knew what they were getting themselves into. I don't really think Luke and I kind of knew what we were going to fall into. And then I remember there was a couple episodes, I think our first episode with Laura Sanger, I was like, if I release this episode, this is either going to like change the course of the podcast or it's going to totally just drop a nuke on it because people are going to be like, this is just bananas. So I remember I was like, well, I have my idea what I want this podcast to be, but maybe there's a whole other road that God wants to take this because I don't know about this episode. Like I love Laura. She's like the real deal, but I just knew that it was going to change.
And it's all spiritual abuse, like satanic abuse is what she talks about, right?
She gets into like, she wrote a book called The Federal Reserve and, what's the name
Roots
of
the Federal Reserve.
Roots of the Federal Reserve.
In the Nephilim.
It's basically how the whole history of how basically this event in Genesis kind of stems from how the world's structured, our monetary systems, and it was really different than talking about Bigfoot.
Right, right.
I was like, wow, Luke.
Or like werewolves. Even your werewolf ones back then were like the big ones.
Dude,
we
go for a Bigfoot like rolling around in gravel to make armor, and we're like, this is really weird. And then you go, just wait, we're about to go down.
How were y'all already? Were y'all already friends? I assume.
We kind of had a ton of mutual friends, and then we met at a party. We were doing a co show with the Bad Christian podcast before they went back when they were still a thing. Yeah. And we were all just a bunch of just goofballs just screwing around one night on their podcast. And then I met Luke and I'm like, hey, we have a bunch of movies. Oh, we're both from Northern California. Oh, you know this guy? Oh, I was on tour with those guys. And then years later, I had this idea to do the podcast, but I knew that it was going to be quite the endeavor. Doing it alone was going to be crazy. And so Luke was tweeting about Bigfoot one day, and I was
Casual,
as one does.
Tweeting about Bigfoot. I was
like, wait a minute. And we had done an episode on a podcast that I did with a buddy years ago, and I was like, okay, this is. I think Luke's the guy.
Yeah.
Let's do this. So I hit him up. I was like, hey, I got everything ready to go. You're in? And he's like, I'm in. And so it was kind of amazing.
It was cool. It was cool because from my standpoint, like Nate had a podcast with Matt. You had your Don't Feed the Trolls. And then I had a podcast with my brother Jordan, which was called Sports Related, and it was a sports variety podcast. It did really well. And it was fun, kind of as things would go. Previous to that, he had to redo his deal at SEC Network. And this is just a lot of extra details. But essentially, they do 360 deals in media, right? Which means that they own everything you do.
Yep.
And so we were in the midst of all of the controversial stuff that was going on in the sports world around Colin Kaepernick and all of these different hot button political things. And Jordan and I just wanted to not take talking points from ESPN.
Yeah, sure.
We basically retired the podcast. And there was a hole for me. You know, I had a corporate job. You still have a corporate job, but had a corporate job and was just like, this is my creative outlet. I really like doing this. And I stopped doing New Year's resolutions in 2020, not because it was 2020, I had no idea what was coming, but because you fail them inevitably, right? So I started writing goals. And so for that year, it was like starting the podcast.
Oh, wow.
And I had an idea for kind of what I thought I wanted to do, and so I was fishing it out with Schneeweiss of all things, one of my buddies who is a mutual band connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, shout out to Jeff Schneeweiss. He's a producer, produces a bunch of Bethel's music and Maverick City, and I was like, maybe he can edit.
If his first name is Jeff, that's tough that y'all picked to call him by his last name. That's a lot harder.
I know.
Than just saying
That's
Jeff.
why you do it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. We're built different.
There's a lot of Jeffs.
Luke, we're built
There's
different.
a lot of Jeffs. So
He's probably got a lot of nicknames too.
Yeah,
there's a lot. Yeah, probably not for the show.
Yeah. Same for yours.
But the idea was that then Nate hit me up, and it was out of the blue, and it was like, this is what I was kind of asking for from God, is praying into these goals I have. I kind of have a desire for this, and I knew Nate because there's this band world things from Northern California and Tooth and Nail and all these overlapping friends, and it was just like, this sounds fun. Like I always have been into the Bigfoot thing as far as finding Bigfoot where they never find Bigfoot. Yeah. Just looking for Bigfoot, not finding Bigfoot should be the name of the show, but because they never find him. And then it was just let's do this. Like
I don't think Luke knew how like laser focused I was on like, no, I'm gonna do this. Yeah. He's like, this will be fun. It'll be a fun hobby. It'll be
then you're cool. Kind of married to the person. You don't realize this when you get into it. But like
the
person I talk to most other than my wife is Nate.
Yeah.
Like, and you don't know getting into it that this is what you're doing. But it's been an amazing thing. I think Nate and I say this a lot, and we really mean it. It's not trope. It is that we really feel like that is corny or even as crazy. Everything's over spiritualized in a lot of ways. It's kind of random to say considering what we do, but really feel like God is sort of doing what He wants to do with this, and that's what we want. And Nate said that's why the show is kind of started as let's figure out what Bigfoot is, and now we're into all these other things. And I know Nate will say the same thing. Sometimes I think we want to let God do what God wants to do with this vehicle. And it's been an amazing journey. And I think the thing you said at the top is really it's a microcosm for life, right? You're like it reminds me of going on mission trips. I was a YWAMer at one point in my day, but you go on these short-term mission trips, whether it be like Young Life when you're young, or even now, and you think you're going to go out and you're doing these things like that. You're gonna help other people, right? And I think what you find out at the end of these trips is that really you're changed the most, right? Yeah. And God's doing something in you. And I think for us, it's like we are on the same journey, which makes us unique. Like this is not a Luke and Nate are teaching you guys about all this weird stuff. It's like Luke and Nate are on the same journey.
It feels like that as a listener. I feel like I'm learning. Yeah. Y'all are asking the questions that are happening in my head.
That's good. That is good. Yeah.
That's hard.
It's amazing. Nate, will you kind of explain what a blurry creature is? Because the reason we're doing this on Halloween, Blurry Creature holiday.
Yeah.
And so why is the show called that? What is a blurry creature?
I mean, it just goes back to some of the jokes about Sasquatch always being blurry because people are so, in the moment they take a bad photo of this creature, whatever it is, it always comes out blurry. Mitch Hedberg made it is
from a Mitch Hedberg joke.
Yeah. Oh. He made a famous joke about it, like maybe Bigfoot is just blurry. There's an out of focus monster running around the woods, and but. I didn't want to be. There's a lot of Sasquatch shows. They're just kind of pigeonholed into that. But I thought Blurry Creatures.
Which I did not know that until y'all started being like the other shows I listened to. I was like, what a world.
Oh yeah, and it's smart. There's a niche for everything, and I think podcasting is all about the niche. You've got to find it. But I wanted a bigger, because I was listening to. So I got really heavy into Bigfoot stuff when I was remodeling houses when I first moved to Nashville. Yeah. And I came out of a band and was used to having conversations all day long with people. So I need to keep that going because I started to feel like I'm by myself all day long. Yeah. I got to keep my mind engaged here. I'm going to go crazy. And I don't know, Bigfoot podcast just sort of scratched the itch. And then, I started to realize that there were all these questions that were coming up that weren't getting answered. It was just weird stuff is happening, but nobody can explain it because nobody really wants to get biblical. Nobody wants to talk about satanic stuff and like, this feels satanic. What is happening? And people are afraid to have that conversation. And then, towards just getting into David Paulides, Missing 411 stuff and watching more documentaries. And then I started to move from podcasts to documentaries. I was like, okay, something is happening that's bigger than Bigfoot. It's not just this creature that we can't capture. Some people are going missing, and there's scientific data to prove it. And guys like David Paulides, who's like an ex-detective, military police guy, he's trying to put on those glasses and give you the empirical data that people are just up and vanishing, and there's no evidence of where they're going and so he has a whole following for that. So then theologians started coming on, and I was like, okay, what? I grew up in church. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, which is interesting, and then worked at a camp called Mount Hermon.
The irony.
Don't I know Mount Hermon? I've been to like 4 things at Mount Hermon.
It's
Santa
awesome.
Cruz Mountains,
It's
baby.
gorgeous.
I love it there.
It's beautiful. I went to writers' conferences for a long time out there.
I love that place.
Yeah.
I went to school I got a degree in Parks and Rec tourism to like hope
To be a camp guy?
to run
a
the place.
YWAM guy and a camp guy?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy got a degree throwing frisbees. So,
We would have loved
studied
being
a
in a
little,
youth group
I
together,
studied a
you
little
guys.
harder than that in college.
Did you get into Cal Poly? It was hard. It was hard to get into Cal Poly.
Chico State, baby.
But, and then there was probably 10 different Christian communities we were part of. And at Cal Poly, there was a Campus Crusade that had over 1,000 kids.
Wow.
And so I couldn't escape Christian culture, but it was always a different flavor. And then finally I was like, okay, no pastor has ever talked about the Nephilim or any of this stuff.
Yeah, y'all have blown up Genesis 6 for me. That is for sure.
But it's fascinating
Yeah.
because it answers a lot of those weird questions you had just growing up. I went to Christian school too, and we're always in the Old Testament talking about these things. So Blurry Creatures, that's a long-winded intro,
lovely.
is anything that's sort of outside of all the weird creatures that have been rumored to exist, and there's a whole bunch of them, everything from Dogman to Mothman to Bigfoot to Wendigos, Skinwalkers.
That Skinwalker episode, I was like, I'm only listening
That's
to
one of my favorite
daylight.
ones.
Oh,
And then now, a lot of the disclosure stuff. So we're talking about gray aliens, Nordics, all the weird stuff.
I
that
mean,
comes
did
with
y'all
those.
feel like pride in your spirits when you were like, hey, everything the news is saying about the aliens, we told our Blurry Creatures with Tim Alberino a year ago or whoever.
Wild.
It is
That's wild.
why. And I need to.
Perfect
can I-
time to have this podcast.
Yeah. Can I just add something to the suggestion box? Sometimes I think y'all need to drop emergency pods. When that stuff happens, I mean, y'all are like
We did one.
a ticker tape. I need to say.
We did one when they had the House Oversight Committee, which of course is, you get all the weird opinions about what's really happening. But the reality is you have a congressional oversight committee hearing with whistleblowers that have legal protection that are coming forward and saying these things are happening, your government's not telling you this.
Yeah.
Especially when the government narrative and NASA's narrative and all this is saying there's none of this, there's no extraterrestrial life, we don't have any of this, there's no proof of any of this. And then you've got people that are, and I think, this is my opinion, I think are patriots that are coming forward and saying, like, American people deserve to know this. And there's a lot of folks out there who will say, oh, the government's saying X, Y, Z. We're not buying that. But to your point, we did do an emergency pod that week.
Yeah.
We're saying what is really happening, because what you get in social media, most people get a lot of their news is these 30-second clips.
Yeah.
And those are kind of easy to manipulate. And so if you don't watch the entire story and take it all in, then it's easy to take a little bit of that and run with it and say, these are our conclusions. And so we did do that. I think you have an interesting point.
Because I came straight to y'all.
Hey, that
what are they going to say?
That month was crazy.
I
mean, just because of the things that kept happening, you're like, this is, you're always just like, well, this is happening in the future. At some point, there's going to be,
and you also have the
disclosure, but
it takes a couple days to figure out what the heck's going on half the time, and you don't want to put out bad information, and you don't want to put out, you want to just react, because everyone's split about the alien bodies the Mexican government just unveiled.
Yes, wild.
And you never know, right? And it's weird for
like
us
piñatas,
because we hear the weirdest stuff. I mean, that's the hardest part is trudging through. Okay, we're in this truther space and this paranormal space.
And did you just get a bazillion emails from crazy people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
And people think the plane lady was a part of some secret deep state. I'm like, I think she just had too many drinks and went crazy on the plane. I don't. And she feels embarrassed now.
Yeah.
And everyone thought she saw reptilian creatures, which she
Yeah.
could have.
Right.
But I mean, everyone's like this scientist who knows exactly what's going on. So I mean, I think Luke and I try to. I think that's the hardest part about the show is, okay, there's weird stuff, but there's not a demon under every rock.
Yeah.
And we have to try our best to not sensationalize this. But a lot of these things get clicks and views, and if you say some crazy stuff, you blow up on TikTok. But I think Luke and I try to stick to as best we can. But sometimes we feel like, man, is this story true or not?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Those are tough things to sort of vet in some ways too, because in some parts you're vetting someone's personal experience and
right.
like how do you read somebody and their motives? And I think we do a pretty good job saying, what could be the motive behind this? And a lot of times, and some of the most wild ones, you're like, there is literally no play here. There's nothing to gain.
Yeah.
You want us to hide your identity. You don't want your name out there.
I know. Are you talking about that one woman?
That was a wild one. Those are tough
satanic,
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of you, sorry, I don't remember. One of you says repeatedly in the show, you have nothing to gain from telling us this.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So why are you doing this?
Right.
And that stuff's wild.
Other than playing like just a prank on us, or there's like definitely psyop narratives where people were paid, by 3-letter agencies to go on shows like this and create false narratives. And we've had friends on shows who say they've been offered money.
Yeah, not our
show.
Other people in the space who host shows
to
love
fake sort of
so
like
corporate,
deep state fake news. I don't know.
Y'all were just trying to do a show about Bigfoot.
And listen, I think the other thing that's a challenge in this space is like we pose and try to provide like better questions and better answers, but most of these questions don't have an answer yet, or maybe won't have an answer.
Yeah.
Like until we pull a body out of the woods, what is Bigfoot? Until until a ship lands on the White House lawn. Now you can kind of go a lot of places with that now.
Yeah.
But so what we're trying to do is say, let's look at all these things which exist on the fringes and are questions, and how do we find better answers through a biblical lens, through going back to the scriptures, with the foundation of our faith. And so then, then people always want to come say you have an agenda, and our agenda really is nothing except let's just try to let's have these discussions.
Let's talk about the data.
Yeah.
There is so much data on these topics, and I don't think people realize that. They think it's all just in the realm of conspiracy. There's they have actual hard evidence that the Sasquatch footprints aren't fake. We have scientists that are like, look, I'm the best foot expert in the world.
Foot guy.
You can't fake these things.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. So there's so much empirical evidence, specifically the giants topic.
Oh gosh.
We hit the giants
Your Peru
topic.
stuff. So good.
We hit it from the megalithic side, which is ancient construction that's like sort of an anomaly. We hit it from, empirical data of like digging up old newspaper accounts. Yeah. So we 50 slices of pie that sort of put together and say, look, there's evidence these giants were real. This isn't, we look at it from a literary standpoint, mythological standpoint, biblical standpoint.
Well, from a faith standpoint too, right? I mean, the thing
evidence.
The thing that's wild about some of this is that I think that Christianity has become so ingrained in our culture that we forget that it's a very, very supernaturally rooted faith. Like we believe in an immaculate conception and a virgin birth and a transfiguration, talking donkeys, right? And the Bible's full of giants. And so, in this
where do they come from?
Right, in this post-enlightenment and academic paradigm that we find ourselves in now, that's kind of just like, oh, it's allegory. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is such a modern phenomenon.
Yeah, David and Goliath is just standing up to Right,
here's your,
here's
your self-help.
Your tough day. Yeah. It's exactly
well,
right.
everyone was short then. He was just a little bit taller, right?
Yeah,
It's Bible's pretty specific about heights and so I think that maybe even just getting back to that paradigm, putting the supernatural back into the Bible, and I think honestly that in and of itself is where we try to find a lot of our answers for a lot of the weird, right? Whether it be like a dog man or a Bigfoot or the alien phenomena, how do we contextualize that within a biblical paradigm? And it shouldn't be surprising, but I think it is for a lot of people that there are precedents and there are scriptures and there is historical data within our scriptures that I think we can contextualize all of this within, and we live in such a big world. I think that I think we undersell God in a lot of ways if we don't try to contextualize a lot of the stuff that we would consider weird and fringe within that paradigm.
Yeah, and Dr. Michael Heiser is like a big
influence.
Big influence in this whole space, so don't bore me with the Bible. And I think I have naturally just a lot of ADD. And I always was just like trying to find throughout growing up, just sit still, redheaded kid put in the corner, and I just never could. And when you find fascinating things, you just sort of, I want more of this.
Yeah.
And you realize that this whole story we're involved in is not boring. The story of God and humanity is not boring. And somehow we put it into books. We did a systematic theology, and we all went to sleep. It's like a Catholic mass. No. I've been in those masses before, and I'm not, no digs to the Catholics, but it just can become like this thing you do, and you never engaged in your heart at all, and you're like,
well, that's true at Crosspoint too. People can show up and not engage,
right?
Any church. That's true. My church too.
Well,
but I totally know what you're saying.
Right? In the South, it's the thing you do is go to church, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds fun.
Hey, friends, just interrupting this conversation to share about one of our amazing partners, Amra Colostrum. Okay, have y'all heard of Amra Colostrum? When our first shipment came to the office, my coworkers were lining up to be the first to try it because everyone has heard so many good things. This new superfood seems almost too good to be true, and this team over here is a fan. Colostrum is the first nutrition we receive in life, and it contains all of the essential nutrients our bodies need in order to thrive. So Amra Colostrum is a proprietary concentrate of bovine colostrum that helps strengthen immunity, ignite metabolism and anti-inflammation, fortify gut health, activate hair growth and skin radiance. It improves fitness performance and recovery and has some powerful anti-aging benefits. I mean, I will take it. It's just one scoop or packet that you add to cold water or cold food. We've tried the unflavored option and you really couldn't taste it. And we've tried the blood orange flavor too, which adds a good, fun, citrusy taste. It is wholly natural, sustainable, and Amra has thousands upon thousands of 5-star reviews and literally life-changing testimonials from users. So we've worked out a special offer for our friends. You get 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/thatsoundsfun or enter the code thatsoundsfun to get 15% off your first order. That's tryarmra.com/thatsoundsfun. And one more amazing partner I get to tell you about, Thrive Cosmetics. Okay, whether you're all about a full glam makeup look, that's me, or a more natural look, or somewhere in between, that's probably the truest me, Thrive Cosmetics has got us covered. I could talk all day about their Liquid Lash Extensions mascara, which not only makes my lashes look longer, but it lasts all day without smudging or flaking, you guys. It is truly my favorite mascara, probably my favorite makeup. Full stop. It looks like I have lash extensions all the time, but I don't. And you don't have to with the damaging glue and nail and salon prices. And none of that. It's also so easy to remove. It slides right off with warm water and a washcloth. You don't even have to use soap. Here's what I also love. Thrive Cosmetics beauty products are certified 100% vegan and cruelty-free. They're made with clean, skin-loving ingredients, high performance and trademarked formulas, and uncompromising standards. So go give their mascara a try or check out some of their other fun options like their impactful semi-permanent smoothing lipstick. Y'all know I love a lipstick. If you're needing some new makeup or already thinking about some gift ideas for the holidays, you want to try the product that thousands are raving about. Thrive Cosmetics is luxury beauty that gives back. So right now you can get an exclusive 20% off your first order at thrivecosmetics.com/TSF. That's Thrive Cosmetics, CAUSEMETICS.com/TSF for 20% off your first order. That link and pretty much every other link you could, ever hope for are in the show notes below or in the Friday AFD Week in Review email that we send out. And you can sign up to make sure you're getting that in the show notes below as well. Okay, now back to our conversation with Luke and Nate.
That sounds fun.
I think that's one of the interesting things y'all have done for me. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and get to say it to your faces, but also invite my friends who are listening who didn't already know about y'all to know, is you have rekindled in me this, there is so much I don't know, right? It makes the Bible and relationship with God different when you... there was one day y'all talked about maybe giants, and they said sometimes their legs can look like trunks of trees. Is it giants or what is it?
That's in Numbers. It says like they're the heights of cedar trees.
Yeah. And so we were looking out the window and being like, we don't know. We think those are all trees, but we don't actually know, And just
look at like the Dark Waters one where the giants
the
popping out of the swamp.
Yeah. So the mystery of life has been rekindled in some ways.
And thanks for
me.
listening
It's good
too.
to be curious.
Sometimes it's an investment to get into a show like ours, and it's like, do I really want to go down this road?
Yeah.
And I know you're in different spaces than we are, and I just appreciate you even giving us a chance because I think half my friends probably think I'm nuts if they listen in. But part of me is just like, whatever.
Okay.
You know, so it's cool when people take a chance and give us a shot because I do think we come at it from anyone can listen to it. It's not just a bunch of conspiracy theories all rolled in like, oh, these guys are just talking about whatever. We try to do it in a way that, okay, you know, Luke and I both went to college. We understand how it's done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we know that those people don't want to talk about these things. So there's like there's a
And
good
y'all
medium.
title it really well. So if I'm scared, I don't listen. I mean,
Good.
you're great at
And that's what we do. We try to use a blurry
Yes.
creature to sort of, that's the framework of the episode. So we're
Yeah.
going to talk about this creature, whether it's aliens or UFO sightings or it's Bigfoot, you know, all the creatures we talk about. But the list is getting bigger and bigger. There's more blurry creatures out there than I think
wow.
Luke and I even thought.
You keep going. I just what you were saying, Annie. Though I just think it's so important just to be curious.
Yeah.
I think we lose our creativity and curiosity and wonder at them sometimes when we quote unquote grow up, right?
All right.
And there's something about faith like a child, and I think within that is this curiosity for the Bible and for some of the things we don't understand, right? And we're like the weirdo cousin of Bob Goff, I feel, in some ways, right? Because Bob's always talking, and I don't know if you know Bob well or not, but Bob's talking about whimsy, and his whole thing is the joy and the mystery of God back into our faith. And so in some ways, I think we're trying to chase down some of that mystery, but also understand, right? I think providing context and understanding, because there are a lot of people out there, and it's surprising, and we talk about the volume of emails. We get emails where people have a weird experience, like personally have a weird experience. And Nate has one that he's told on the show a few times, but you have this weird experience and you don't want to tell anyone. And for a lot of people, because they can't find answers for some sort of weird paranormal experience they have, ghost or creature or whatever it may be, their kind of knee-jerk default is well, this disqualifies my faith, or this, because the church doesn't have an answer, Broadbrush Church, right? Doesn't have or my particular church didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
Or they convince themselves it didn't even happen.
Right.
Right.
But then there's, where do you go with that? And so it's kind of crazy to have, I don't know, to kind of feel that need for people is bizarre. And also
the medium of a podcast allows it, you know, because it's just, it's really just Luke and I at the end of the day, and we decide we want to push, you know, is this going to go out in the world or not?
Like how many movie quotes and how many times are we going to talk about Waterworld? I mean,
but there's
that's our
systems
call.
in place that allow gatekeepers are sort of gone. I mean, until they shut down the RSS feeds for podcasts. I mean, right now it's still an open floodgate.
We call it a Wild West all the time over here. We're always like, everybody's still learning the rules and making the rules of podcasting.
Yeah.
So
some of these guys have written books and been looking into ufology since the Bob Lazar days, which is like he was the first whistleblower on Area 51 and what they have.
ufology, UFO. Right? Yeah. Just
so there's been this data.
UFOology.
Yeah, that's how the first time you said on
We
the
can
show, I
have
was like,
two O's. Let's put two O's in there.
UFO.
Yeah.
Ufology.
Which is what, you know, we have now happening in Congress.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy, but Tim was talking to us. I don't know if we can talk about this one, but there's some Congress people listening to the show.
Listen to Blurry Creatures?
Yeah. And
oh my gosh.
Who were on the oversight committee for UFOs and invited Tim over to have a discussion about what do we do? What questions do we ask? So it's crazy to think that these people are listening to the show, but it's because Tim's been reading the data, the scientists who studied abductions and got behind the screen memories and actually pieced together what is happening. People are being taken, and there's data on it. There's
He's like a real life Indiana Jones.
He is.
I was with them last week too.
Yeah.
We were in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Making jokes about Costner.
But
Not talking about serious stuff at all.
You have these conversations, you don't think anyone's going to listen. Now you're like, dude, congressmen are
listening.
What?
Okay, so I don't know if y'all know this, but I have a podcast called Let's Read the Gospels where I'm literally reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John every month. So I'm about to start again tomorrow on November 1st with a new round. But one of the things I've run into that I would love for y'all to talk about is multiple times in the Gospels, the disciples and Jesus talk about ghosts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Have y'all had a show about this yet?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed
You
it.
haven't listened, Annie.
Ghost show. I'm going back to it.
Our last show with Heiser, I think, was one of his last interviews he did before he passed away, was about this, was about ghosts and the difference between, you know, the spirits of humans and the spirits of other supposedly dead giants, which are
Dead giants.
Which are the
I gotta
demons.
listen to this
Which are
one.
the
Okay,
demons.
which are demons.
So Mike
Yeah.
did. We mentioned Heiser, and he has an. If you're not familiar with Dr. Michael Heiser and his approach to the Bible, he has an unbelievable book called The Unseen Realm.
Yeah.
He also has a more.
Is that like is that an entry level book? Is that like
I
if
was
we're
to say,
brand new to all of
kind
this?
of.
Kind of. It's dense. It's like C.S. Lewis dense.
Okay.
If that means anything to anyone, so. Like you may need to reread some of it. He also has one called Angels and one called Demons, which are a little more approachable. But Unseen Realm was really kind of his opus.
Okay.
And what Mike is, he became a great friend. We lost him this year. He passed away to cancer. But he only did 2 interviews last year, and one was with us. We ended up having a really cool friendship with Mike. But yeah, the show was fascinating, right? Because ghosts are the phantasma, right? Is actually the Greek for what they think. They think Jesus is a ghost on so that's an odd response.
And he says, "I'm not a ghost. I'm a guy." Like after he resurrects, "I'm not a ghost. Look, you can
or
see my
Peter.
body." And you're
what
like,
about when Peter gets out of prison and they show
Yeah.
them, they're like,
Yeah.
it's the ghost of Peter here.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
like, have you thought about that? That's weird.
"But but Christians talk about ghosts. Like we can't talk about ghosts because that's always demonic."
Right.
Well, we have this, people go here when they're gone. And we have these these ideas that we bring into the scripture that we're not aware of. I think we all have that. There's so many things that people talk about that are in books but not in the Bible, but it's just kind of become part of the Christian culture. And I think what Luke and I talk about is character traits of different blurry creatures. Like the demons have very specific character traits, and they display those. And there's other creatures that people will call demons that don't seem to exude those same character traits. So it's sort of short-sighted to say everything's a demon because it's not really the case when you look at the data.
Yeah, like Civil War battles. Like the weird things about ghosts, right, are like these. I know you're
Laying of
getting there.
history.
The time loop things where, like you go to Gettysburg, one of my favorite places with my dad when I was like 18 or 19, and the stories there that like the guys and gals that curate that national park and that place because it's a sacred place now for the United States in our history, will say that there will be battles and you'll smell gun smoke and you'll see these. Ghosts, yes,
Luca.
So, but what happens with that? Like, what happens when people see people in period clothing that don't interact? Right, that isn't really demonic. That's odd. And there's a great
we want to put everything that we can't see as angel or demon.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very binary.
And y'all are saying that's
We did a long episode on ghost ships and ghost trains. And so trains will run. They'll run the tracks at night. Ghost ships, all these sailors report these old ships would just sail up right next to them, and there's nobody on board. But it's like a physical thing that's happening.
When they stopped making ghosts after the Civil War, right?
right. It was an 1800s thing.
There's no emo kid ghosts. You're like just not.
But it's not as easy to say. It's
like the ghost is in girl jeans and has a swoop. You're like, this is not. I got you with emo kid. I threw you off completely. Every once in a while, I try to snipe Nate on
you
shows
did it.
too, and I got him here.
You took him back to Northern California.
He snipes me all the time. Right we're about to start an episode. Someone's like sitting there we haven't met for the first time.
Yeah, we're just like, this is always our pre-roll prep, and then I'll just try to get Nate right beforehand, so he kind of gets like, I'm off my game now. I don't know.
Well, I will say that like Christians default to everything's a deception because they know Satan is, he's the deceiver.
Yeah.
So everything you don't understand is a deception.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, there are weird stories of ghosts, like women in white walking around confused, and they're misplaced, but they happen all over the place. This is just one ghost story that's repeated throughout time. There's these period dressed women that are confused, and there's usually some trauma associated with their sightings or the history of this one person. So what we've found is there can be ghosts that are stuck in this trauma loop, whether it's like a passenger crashes and everyone dies traumatically, or like someone gets killed or someone's murdered on their honeymoon or something, or someone commits suicide, and then there's this loop. But see, demons have a very specific, they're like carnal creatures. They used to be in bodies. They're no longer bodies. That's why they're trying to get into a body, but there's a legality issue. They have to have a legal access to a human, but they want to get back in what it feels like to be in a body. And then you have these confused spirits just floating around.
Well, and demons very much have the same desires of the flesh without a body. They want to eat and drink, and they have carnal desires, right?
Yeah.
And so then,
but they can't just take over anybody.
Right. So then you have to delineate some of this. I think if you want to listen to the episode, was it our Halloween episode?
We'll go back and link to it.
Yeah, but Dr. Michael Heiser, and interesting, because biblically, most importantly, go to the Bible and look at these examples, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go, okay, there's something different has happened here than the man at the tombs and the demonic, and these is somehow Peter gets out of prison and they think that his ghost is there, and then the disciples think the ghost is on the water, and the raising of Samuel by the witch of Endor. You have these human spirits. And I'm not saying we know exactly how this works. We just can say, like, it's not, we can pretty well say you can't broad brush it all and say it's all demons now.
I think that's the gift, Luke, is if it was what you're just saying of we don't have to understand it for it to be true.
Right.
And I think a lot of people think, okay, I can understand angels and demons is what I used to think. I can understand angels and demons, A versus B, good versus bad. And so once you can understand it, then it is true. But then when you go, wait, there's other categories. Well, I don't understand that, so it must not be. And that's just
And
that is not real.
I go to this a lot, and you know, this is my point of view, but I think we look around ourselves here on Earth, right? We look around at the diversity of life. I mean, trees and bugs, and even within people, all these different types of people, different cultures, different animals. We discover new animals all the time, right? I think that our view of heaven then is quite opposite. It's so binary. It's God, angels, and then you have demons, which are here because they're disembodied
Just playing
spirits.
harps all day long.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And maybe, and this is just my hypothesis, maybe there is a diversity of life in the heavenlies as well. And so that we short sell ourselves to say it's all angels with wings and and there's good angels and bad angels, and then you have the demons, and that's really it. And maybe not, you know, because our descriptions of heaven are very interesting. It's there's roads and buildings, and I always go back to this one that Tim brought up at one time talking about manna is the bread of heaven, and he goes, well, we just reverse engineer that. That means to make bread, you have to have grain. So, are these things happening in heaven as we understand it? That realm, right? The kingdom of heaven. I don't know, but I think that perhaps we can't categorize everything into two categories, right? And there is a lot more. And then you can get into alien space and talk about all these different sort of creatures in that space, and perhaps that's just part of the diversity of that realm, right? And not that we have to, you know, think that everything's from another planet or whatever, right?
And the Bible calls those, like, you know, sons of God. It uses different terminology for these things. So, you know, one of the things we talk about is how the sons of God that were talked about in Job and they're talked about in Genesis. It's like there is, you know, the daughters of men and the sons of God, which is angelic beings, but we're close enough to where, you know, the angels and humans were able to reproduce, and their offspring were these
family show, Nate.
These colossal beings.
Right. Nephilim.
Yeah.
I didn't even hardly know how to say that word until y'all.
But there's still some debate in the space. Nephilim.
Oh, do they say it?
But you
Depends
have
how much flair you
But
want.
it's hard because it's like the Bible drops that and keeps rolling.
Yeah.
But you as a modern day human got to go like, wait, humans can mate with what? You know?
Was it Heiser who said he could spend his whole life in Genesis?
Yeah. But it's just a paradigm buster. Even just that verse is like, oh wait, angels and humans are close enough that we can. But then people get in complicated ideas, and that's why our show's continuing to go forever, because there's so many more questions. And does that mean they appear like us in our realm, or are they actually like us in reality? But I think that the Nephilim topic it's a pretty heavy one, but it's hard for people at first, and then you kind of got to go, okay, well, here's all this evidence for these giants, so we got to work backwards. We know that these things existed, and the David Goliath story is just one snapshot of a huge narrative that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, what you were saying earlier, Luke, about when we're kids, David and Goliath was a giant.
Yeah.
The older we get, the less giant he becomes.
Yeah.
The less supernatural he becomes.
Just a
he's
bad
just
guy.
a really tall guy. He's just a really big buff
just a
guy.
mean
I mean,
guy.
It's nice.
like
It's
y'all.
an allegory. It's just an allegory.
Right. Okay, so I brought you my ghosts. You had to answer for that. Here's the other thing I really wanted us to talk about today.
I know what's coming here.
Megalodons.
All right.
I love dinosaur sharks so much. But y'all have never done an episode on megalodons.
It's hard because people want us to do we haven't done one on Nessie either. So.
And I used to live in Scotland, so I feel Nessie too.
Yeah.
I do need a Nessie episode. I
think-
got baptized in Loch Ness.
How's your Scottish accent?
There
I don't know
you
if I've
go.
heard it
It's
before.
It's terrible. I always say,
just gotta
whenever
spit a lot.
I repeat what my friends in Scotland say, I always say, pretend Shrek is saying this to you. And people can do it in their heads.
Little donkey.
So,
That's
there you go.
that's the only place I couldn't understand what they were telling me when I was in Scotland.
Yeah.
Like, say that again.
Yeah.
Say it again. I don't know what you say.
So y'all need a Nessie show
We doing it
and a Meg show.
Yeah, I do know that everything was bigger. You know, so a lot of guys come on our show and say the megafauna, there was bigger trees, bigger animals. They find these giant armadillo creatures. They find these giant turtle shells. So it's possible there was just a huge shark. And I think that
Oh, we know that. There's big teeth.
Yeah, there
Yeah.
is. But I mean, I think there's probably still out there because people still see them, like these giant shadows just go through these like Japanese cameras underwater. But,
Nate, if I've sussed you out at all in the years we've been friends and you didn't know,
yeah,
if you watch Meg and Meg 2, we will get our episode.
All right.
If you get into how in the
here
world
we
did they
go.
get up from the trend, because the story is
Okay.
they're below like an area of water that's too cold that they can't come up through
Thermoplane.
the thermoplane. And then it breaks, and that's how they get up.
Ah.
If something goes through it, so let's say
So is it like
a submarine
hyper-oxygenated down
may have
there?
accidentally gone through it, and while they're not looking,
Up comes the big guy.
Just one or all of them?
well,
What happens if there's
depends
like
on which movie. If you're watching Meg, you think it's just one.
What happens
but
if there's a
it's not.
typhoon? Like,
How do they breathe down there?
You get a tornado.
They breathe? Do the sharks have to breathe?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe Meg. I don't know. I don't know that
Sharks
answer.
have to breathe.
There has to be some sort of oxygen getting into the water, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
The thermoplane is just about
thermoplane.
temperature.
Maybe just
Yeah.
bubbles from volcanoes.
It's like
Yeah.
that's what they talk about with Lake Tahoe. They're like it's so cold at the bottom that when you get a big warming, that things will pop up like just old
No.
bodies of Native Americans and like gangsters that were
Really?
thrown in the lake.
Maybe there's a megalodon down there.
I
I'm
don't
just telling
think
y'all,
so.
I've
I
not
think it's
enjoyed
fascinating.
2 movies like I've enjoyed
Well, those-
Meg and
those
Meg 2 in a
teeth-
long
Well,
time.
I'm just saying, what if there's an oceanic tornado and those megalodons get caught up in the tornado?
And you have your Sharknado. You have your Megnado.
Megnado.
I live for a Megnado.
Megnado.
I mean, so those are that and the Nessie one. I would love a Nessie show. Is
Yeah,
that on your radar?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They just did a huge. Was it this year?
Yeah,
there
they
was
just went and tried
this
to find him again, or
massive
her.
undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, him or her.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just Luke and I are just. It's like the doors just blew open on all these creatures, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, we could literally spend 2 years on this.
How far
thing.
advanced are y'all planned? Like right now in the fall? I mean, do y'all know your next week's show? Or are you like 3 weeks out?
This next week's episode is gonna be on crop circles. It's supposed to come out
great.
today.
Oh, sorry.
So we
My bad.
interviewed. No, it's fine.
You're like, Annie, you're not getting a show because you got a show.
Craig needs we need a hand here.
Yeah.
But I know it's good. Like sometimes I need a break because I get too zoned in. I just go crazy. It's like editing all day long, trying to make it. Where's this going? But we interviewed a lady that spent the last 30 years looking at crop circles and kind of gave us the details of why these things aren't. There's some hoaxes,
Yeah.
but for the most part, they're not. Why they're not hoaxed, where they are, what they do, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And some of the bizarre stuff around crop circles, which, I think
can't
most of
wait.
us, when we think about all these topics, when we think about giants, we think about ghosts, when we all have this preconceived idea of what this stuff is. And I think for Christians, I think we bring a lot of baggage into the story
Yeah.
through whatever it is. And I think that's the hardest part is when there's a certain type of listener that listens with an open mind, but also listens to the data and goes, okay, well, the data has to support what I know to be true about the Bible. And I think a lot of people, they don't understand that biblical writers knew everything and read everything.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't afraid of information, like Luke said earlier. Like you got to be curious and read all these things.
Yeah.
I think sometimes modern Christians are so afraid to read anything. It's like we brought on a guest that goes to every single pagan festival just so he's a Christian, just so he knows what they're doing and what they're
wow.
talking about. He's at Burning Man, and he
He
writes
writes the Satan Con.
Yeah.
He's a wild man.
Yeah.
But
That sounds scary
He's
to
not
me.
afraid
No,
of.
thanks.
He's not afraid of it because he knows he's trying to write books and educate people. Of like,
Yeah.
this is what the world believes. This is
Yeah.
their. And I think these UFO religions are about to deceive a lot of people because Christians aren't talking about UFOs. They're not talking about
I
disclosure.
did not know there were UFO religions.
I mean, the biggest one's Scientology.
Oh,
you know?
well, certainly, yes. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
No, but it's the whole ancient aliens
Yeah.
agenda as well, right?
Yeah.
There's the underpinning of ancient aliens is that
Yeah.
there's
It's a huge
it's
show.
the Anunnaki, and it's Mike Heiser
like 20
completely
seasons.
dismantled their entire dogma essentially,
Yeah.
and he never got invited back to their to their conference. They didn't know what they were doing, but
Yeah.
to that point too, like Heiser used to talk about going to UFO conventions because he would say that the people
Yeah.
there
Yes.
were most hungry for the gospel.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were
the most open and available.
most open and
Yeah.
available, and they were
I
searching.
remember him saying that, yeah.
And so I think it's interesting. It's such a weird little mission field in some ways to be in
Yeah.
because people are looking for answers, especially when mainstream media starts talking about things that are very uncomfortable
Yeah.
for a lot of people, right? Things that were on the Hollywood screens, not by accident, of
Yeah.
course, and are now part of a mainstream talking point. And really, the irony is it's not really mainstream. This whole UFO House Oversight Committee was not covered by any of the mainstream media, which should be a tell.
Yes.
Yeah, NASA came out and said that, it's all, we don't support any of this, and
oh wow,
but it's not a government narrative.
Yeah,
but we live in this time now where the dissemination of information is instantaneous and it's worldwide, and so you can find your news sources on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all these other places that I'm too old really to understand anymore, but.
Me too.
So it goes out though, right? And so these conversations are happening, and we just want to have the conversation from a standpoint of being Christians. How should we think about this? What questions should we ask?
Yeah.
Where should we be looking? And we always go back to the Bible, right? I think there's people have, more than once have said that you guys are fascinated by the darkness, and it's like that is not it.
Yeah.
I always go back to the Art of War because I love the Art of War. It's this ancient book, and essentially the paraphrase I'm going to do is that if you know your enemy but know not yourself, you can't win. If you know yourself and not your enemy, you can't win. But if you know yourself and know your enemy, you'll be victorious. And that's a very bad paraphrase of this part of Sun Tzu. Apologies on that, but it's not a direct quote. But essentially, I think that principle is tried and true. Like I think we should be cognizant of what the schemes and the agendas and the narratives of the darkness are, so that we're educated to say that is not it, right? Because if we as Christians and the church as a broad brush, the church as a body is not interested in discipling other Christians about biblical truths and how we should think about and question the things that are happening now in mainstream culture, the world is more than willing to disciple them in their narrative. And that narrative is not going to be of God and not going to be of Christ. In fact, it'll be anti-Christ for all intents and purposes. So that is the space. Like, how do we have these conversations so they become part of our Christian, vernacular is the wrong term, but the Christian conversation, right?
But also not throw like a Christianese answer at it.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Nate.
Because there's this physicality part to all these things. Like they find Bigfoot bodies, they find tracks, they find craft.
We have Bigfoot bodies.
No, I don't know bodies.
Well, they found them. It's just where do they go?
Where are they? Yeah.
But they find the physical evidence that this thing's out there, and they find UFOs. And even guys like Bob Lazar, he's saying that the 9 craft that he had, observed at Area 51, one of them was ancient. Wow. That they basically an archaeological find.
It's weird.
And then we interviewed Dr. Diana Pasulka on our show, who said that she got to go in the Vatican archives. I've said this a lot on our show. But there was a whole wing in the Vatican archives about UFOs. So this isn't a modern day Hollywood thing. Yeah. It's like Hollywood has taken what they know and put their spin on it, just like a lot of these agencies have. So everyone's trying to control the narrative.
That's why The Shape of Water freaked me out, is not because, do y'all remember that movie?
Yeah.
As I thought, if they know how to write this may be truer than I want it to be.
Exactly.
If they know how to make up this thing that is part reptile and part human and lives in water but has a relationship with a female, I was like, I'm out. I'm out, eject.
Yes.
I think all these guys
live on a Southwest flight.
Yeah,
like, what is happening
That's
here?
it. I'm like, yikes.
And that's kind of what we talk about on the show is everyone's lifting from something. I don't think humans are just magically creating all this stuff. I mean, all this stuff goes back to the days of Noah, when this knowledge was given to us from other realms.
Yeah.
And we knew how to do all these things instantly. We knew how to do pharmakia. We knew how to do beautification. We knew how to make weapons of war.
Animal husbandry.
Yeah.
And how do we just make it all? How do we know how to do all these things? How do you know, like, you take this one leaf, you do this stuff to it, you boil it, you come back, you chop it up, you do it 1,000 times, all of a sudden you have these crazy psychotic drugs. It's just sad to us that people can't understand that human beings have been corrupted since the beginning, and that was part of the reason why God had to restart things and the flood narrative and maybe the Tower of Babel and other things, that these events happened. This physical rebellion happened. They were taking everything God made and destroying it and corrupting it, and sometimes genetically modifying it. And we go, no, it's impossible. We're doing it today. So we're kind of coming back to the days of Noah, when we're taking God's creation.
Jesus said we would. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're playing God again. We're
Nate.
So the next book, right? It's 23 Reasons Jesus Comes Back in 23. We're going back to it.
That's it.
$9.99.
That sounds fun.
Okay, now back to finish up our Halloween conversation with our blurry guys, Luke and Nate.
That sounds fun.
Okay, let me ask you this last question.
Sure.
What do you know about God now that you didn't know before you started the show?
I believe that God has a family, and He wants a family, and we are a part of that family. And I didn't really understand the Trinity before I started the show, because when you lay out these characters, you start to realize Jesus is the Son of God, and they have a family, and that's why we all are obsessed with family. That's why I love my kids to death, and that fatherly spirit has like transcended my understanding. I think I had this medieval perspective of the Trinity. I had this medieval, a lot of medieval understandings of the Gospels, the Old Testament, but I think God wants a family, and in us, and the gospel is coming back to the family. We get to be back part of that, and
the prodigal son.
And Jesus is talking to his dad all the time in the Gospels. He's talking to his dad at the Transfiguration, at his baptism, on the cross, in the garden. He's talking to his father, and I don't think I really got that. And I know for a lot of people that is like strangely a hard thing to hear and to think about. Wait a minute, how can that be? Because you have this like old, in a Christian school answer, well, it's all 3 in 1, this egg thing. And I'm like, when you put the characters up, you see, wow, God has created us to be a part of this story. And a specific, we have a specific role to play. It's changed. I see it in everything now. And I'm like, wow, so helps me be a better dad. And I know that's like a lot. That's a big thing to drop at the end, but
it's beautiful.
I think that's what we all want, to be a part of the family. And I think a lot of us have, daddy and mommy issues, and then we reject God because of that. But I don't know why having sort of a chart, a flow chart of creatures helps me understand that there's a hierarchy of beings, and we're one of them. Yeah. And we're all created for a reason. So that's kind of what I've learned a lot.
Yeah, this is a tough question. I think there's so many things. I think from the idea of a seed war, I think is something that I didn't think about before the show a lot. I think everyone to an extent.
I had never thought of that.
I think 2020 broke a lot of people to an extent, and I think that was a red pill. Everything that happened in societally, culturally, it should have red pilled a lot of people. And I think in the same way, the show itself, like opening up and maybe reading the Bible again, just maybe in a completely new way, and understanding like, wow, okay, like the first prophecy is Genesis 3, and it's the prophecy of Christ. It's saying that the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent, and then you go downstream and watch everything play out, and you go, oh, this is why the genealogy is so important. This is what happened in Gen 6. This is why there was a flood. Like the darkness is trying to breed out humanity, so there can be no Messiah, and the Messiah has to be fully human. You go to Revelation, you see it, and John weeps, and who can open the scroll? You have all of these things, and like, man, it fit. I think just understanding just how unbelievably amazing the story of Christ is, and to look at it again and sort of in the weird context that we have discussions, understanding just, and Nate said it great, just the love of God for his kids, and the lengths that God went to restore humanity back into family through Jesus. That, with the agenda of the darkness, and then kind of taking that tapestry or that lens, and then looking at what's happening now, and going like, there are no new deceptions. Like there's just new marketing.
Wow.
It's like always been a Marvel movie, and we sort of forgot. Like, it's always been sort of the Lord of the Rings, Marvel-esque, and I think that's where we lift it from. That's where those movies get it from. And I think when you listen to a show like ours, you start to go, this is just, the whole thing is bizarre and wild, and there's been this war from the beginning, and they, like Luke said, they try to breed us out, and you got to start with a creature like Bigfoot to get there.
Yeah. But we had to.
Yeah.
But I just think, I think it just, the gospel of Christ is the most incredible and amazing story and thing to ever happen in the history of all history, right? And I think that to peel back and kind of onion that and into to what was all happening is just a mind grenade in and of itself, right? And a heart grenade to try to unpack the things that Christ was undoing, and then also the things he was undoing and things he was doing.
Yeah.
And you wade into a level of darkness in this show because a lot of what we consider paranormal does have a demonic, tag to it, and demonic in the sense of it being evil, not necessarily demon, but evil, right? And so but I think exposing that, it opens up your eyes to being like, man, there is so much going on. God is so good and so much bigger than all this. But this is all very important context if we're to understand the world we live in, the history to the point of this vapor of a life we have, and then our role in this place and what it is, big, small, in between. Nothing is small to God, right? Yeah. So doing our role in this space for the kingdom of God. And I don't know what each and every person's is, but I think that it's just been a fascinating journey for Nate and I to do this and talk about the weird. And glad you come along with us.
I have never thrown away hair from my hairbrush at a hotel ever again since the skinwalkers told me not to.
There's an Annie outside. She's here. That's not Annie.
I have not left a hair at a hotel, and I stay in a lot of hotels in my job, and
that
I've been
is funny.
Only clean your hairbrush out at home. Don't give them that much to work with.
Burn it all.
Oh man, y'all had me in my worries about that.
That is funny. Yeah, sorry about that.
Hair.
I know, but I think I can't really control if I leave one. I have a lot of hair.
Right.
I can control if I don't clean out my hairbrush.
Right.
If they don't have a pile to work with, I can control that.
Man, that coyote kind of looks like Annie
Yeah,
out there.
that's
This is weird. Don't open the door.
Well, okay,
funny.
so for our friends to know, listening, you can be a member of the Blurry Verse. I am a member, proud member.
We're grateful for that.
Well,
Amazing.
listen, y'all have far earned it. I'm having so much fun. They get you a ton of extra things. Y'all do movie nights. There's special episodes that are a lot more of the people's experiences, which I think is a lot of wisdom on y'all's part to give some of the stuff that you can't back up with the facts to members. I think that's really smart. And then also BlurryCon. Y'all do a conference.
And we have trips.
Are you doing it again?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Is it already sold out again?
No,
we haven't even announced it.
It's probably
Okay,
going to be, next fall.
Okay.
But we have a bunch of ideas. We're going to Costa Rica in February with Tim Alberino. And then, we're releasing a book with Tim coming up too.
Oh my gosh. You're very welcome to come back when the book comes out if you want to. I would love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're doing the Book of Enoch with Tim and some spicing up some commentary and some art and just...
Listen, I'm being very chill with y'all here. I don't know what I'd do if Tim Alberino was sitting right there. Just so y'all know. I mean, I'm doing good to be... We have long history. We do not. I'm being very cool. I don't know what I'd do if y'all brought Tim Alberino in here.
Gosh.
He's a normal guy. He's funny.
No, he's not. He is Indiana Jones. He wears cargo pants all the time.
You're right. He has a uniform. And
it is.
And if he didn't wear it, I'd be very
wild.
disappointed.
I know.
He is wow. That's awesome. Yeah. So everybody can keep up with y'all Instagram, all the places.
Yep.
Yeah, blurrycreatures.com. That's kind of
where it is. And the merch drops.
The merch drops are fun.
Yeah.
Luke hates me because I'm always...
Yeah, because it's in your garage, right? Or you're somewhere.
It's overflowed out of my garage into other spaces in my home.
Oh, boy. Well, I'm not... I was hoping you meant it was all the way out. No,
who would have thought people would want podcast merch, but they like the blurry gear.
We have fun. It's again, our show's 80s themed. Nate and I try to take very serious topics and not take ourselves seriously and also have fun on this platform. So... Yeah, we're going to keep on.
That's a good setup because
blurry.
The very last question we ask for both of you is because the show is called That Sounds Fun. Tell me what you do for fun.
Oh, go ahead, Nate.
Oh, I just bought this hybrid electric bike. I've been riding around all over town because it's kind of
Franklin
fun.
Town or Nashville Town? Where are
I'm
you?
in Hendersonville.
Oh, okay.
So I'm up there. There's a bike path that goes all around.
Yeah.
So you're just not pedaling by the lake. You're just riding.
No, it's like you can kind of go wherever you want.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to worry about I gotta hoof it up that hill.
Yeah, that's right.
But I can just I can go. And then you get a little bored. You just zip through traffic.
Yeah.
I kind of like it because sometimes you just need to you don't want to get run over. So
it's like a moped.
It's like a moped and a bike.
But you can pedal if you so choose.
Yeah. But my kids like to go on bike rides and they have these little electric bikes and they're always just dusting me. I'm like, I gotta get some. So I bought a hybrid bike and I'm like, this thing rules.
Yeah.
And so at night I've been just riding all over the place and it's kind of nice just pray and get out of your head and ride around. But my kids, they like to. I'm sort of do what my kids like to do right now, which is.
How old are they?
They're 7 and 9.
Okay.
So we swim a lot. We play a lot.
Yeah.
They drive me crazy.
Talk a lot about dinosaurs.
Talking a lot about dinosaurs.
I mean, the idea that one of your children hasn't brought up a megalodon.
Oh, no, they bring it up.
Okay, great.
They bring it up at school, and they come home and they tell me
Right.
they always bring all this stuff. Like my kid brought home this chart the other day, and it was like aliens on the moon, and then there was a monkey crossed out, it said no evolution, and all this
Oh,
other stuff.
boy.
And they're like challenging the narrative at their school. I pin them up in my studio
Yeah.
as a reminder.
Here we
I don't
go.
even talk to them a lot about it. They
Yeah.
just sort of know. They're just like sponges. So
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
I'm in the dad zone. It's kind of fun because you just forever you're just wiping butts, and you
Yeah.
just now we're having fun, and
Yeah.
I know that soon they're going to be too cool. So it's like this small
Yeah,
window.
It's a sweet window.
So I do what they like to do, but we catch lizards and squirrels and all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
and sometimes it drives me crazy.
You have a pet squirrel.
We did for a while. He's outside
You're still
now.
wiping butts, though.
I am.
Oh, he's just the cutest, though.
Thank you.
My gosh. Okay, what do you do for fun, Luke?
Yeah, well, I mean,
with
hang with Jack, my 15-month-old son, and my wife Amy. Yeah, I mean, for fun, I'm a bourbon guy, so a glass of bourbon and a cigar. I try to hang with some of the guys that I do life with in Franklin. Yeah. It doesn't have as much as I'd like, but I try to do that. I haven't played golf in 18 months. That's unfortunate. I used to play golf a lot.
In
but
18 months? That is a very long time.
Yeah, I was actually talking to my brother last night. It was the last time I played was at his bachelor party, and he's like, "I haven't played either." I'm like, "Okay, I don't feel terrible."
I'm picking it up. It's one of my 2024 goals.
There we
I
go.
love playing.
Yeah, I can't wait. Does Amy play?
No.
Oh, I'll
But
get her
here's
in
the
at the
thing,
same
right?
time. She and I'll
So
start.
we have a toddler son. The idea of having 6 hours to do anything, like, would be for me, for Luke, is I don't even know what I would do. Probably wouldn't be golf. I mean, doing community in life with our friends, having a nice cigar and a bourbon. That is. It's football season.
Yeah.
Try to watch football.
Oh, me too. My Georgia Bulldogs, y'all. It's
Yeah.
so good. Charles Robinson is a friend of the show. Is
Oh.
it his cigars?
Of course it is.
Of course.
That's an Icky.
Yeah, we tell people every Christmas that is the gift for dads.
I was just texting with Charles. We're trying to get together and have a cigar this week.
We love him. We love him here.
he's
Him
the
and Susan have
greatest.
both been on the show.
Have they?
So, yeah.
Susan watched helped out with Jack for a while, and she
Yeah.
still does. Yeah.
Okay. That's who y'all should get on. I mean, him talking about blurry stuff. I bet he's got some
Oh, we have some fun talks. We're
Yeah.
sitting around the fire.
Yeah.
He loves the show. I keep
bet.
giving him shirts. Every time I see him, he's wearing a Blurry Creatures shirt. And I'm just like, and he goes, Susan and I were in bed the other day. We rolled over and both in blurry shirts. And he just like looked at her and he's like, Luke, And I'm like,
What did he do?
I love it.
That is the most surprising part about all of this. It's
Yeah.
just the people that are listening.
Yeah.
The irony is these are the conversations I still have around the fire, like we talked about.
Yeah.
You still
Yeah.
talk about these things with your friends. And so I think
Yeah.
I would always say this, and it's 100% the truth. We would still do this if no one listened, because
Yeah.
I think Nate and I want to have these conversations
Yeah.
because they grow you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because
And they're the most interesting.
they're so interesting.
Oh, sometimes when episodes comes out, the first thing that happens at lunch around our double wide is like, has everybody listened to Blurry Creatures? Can we just talk about this real quick? So, well, thank y'all for doing this today. I'm
Thank
really
you.
grateful.
Thank
Happy
you.
Halloween to us.
Right? Yeah.
I am grateful for y'all and the work you do. You've opened up my eyes to things of God, and I'm really grateful. Oh, y'all, isn't all of that fascinating? I know, it's fascinating. So listen, go to Blurry Creatures podcast account on Instagram. Thank Luke and Nate for being on the show today. Listen, give their show a listen. Scroll through the feed, find a couple of episodes that you are interested in what they are saying. Hit subscribe, enjoy the conversations. I'm telling you, it is so fun. It is so fun. And if you have any questions from this episode, drop them in the Q&A box on your Spotify app if you're a Spotify listener, or send them to us on Instagram at That Sounds Fun Podcast, and we'll try to answer them there. If you need anything else from me, you know I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Annie F. Downs on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the places you may need me. That's how you can find me. And I think that's it for me today, friends. Go out or stay home and do something that sounds fun to you. I will do the same on this Halloween. Today, what sounds fun to me is meeting up with some of my friends in the Chelsea neighborhood of New York and seeing New York do Halloween. I'm really excited to see some of my mini BFFs dressed up and having a great time spending time together. So y'all have a great couple days. We'll see you back here on Thursday with one of our favorites. I mean, this week, we do not deserve this week. We are blessed and highly favored. Coming on Thursday is Brooke Lidgertwood. Y'all, I cannot wait for her to be back. You're going to love this episode. We'll see y'all on Thursday.